Oh, Eddie. This is not going to go well. So we've got some word now on actual storylines that are influencing the Venom movie that comes out next year. And it kind of has sucked away the little hope I had. In case you were wondering, that was spiked apple cider I was drinking at the front end of this. So the word has come down that they are drawing inspiration from two specific Venom-related stories, namely Lethal Protector, which was Venom's first solo miniseries, and also Planet of the Symbiotes. I've read Lethal Protector. I actually have Lethal Protector because, yeah, I was really into Venom in the 90s. What do you want from me? I was 10. So I've read that. I can speak on that one specifically. Planet of the Symbiotes I have not read. But just the fact that these are the two they're pulling from, there's one very simple common thread that they have in both of them. And that is symbiotes other than Venom factoring in, generally as additional villains. So Lethal Protector saw Venom leave New York, which was where Spider-Man was, after basically he said, look, I'll stop trying to kill you, but you can't chase me. And Spider-Man reluctantly agreed to that, and Venom went off and did his own thing. He kind of became a little bit like the Punisher, because he was doing the whole protecting the, well, the Punisher's just kind of a kill the criminals. So he was like a split between Spider-Man and the Punisher because he was protecting the innocent by killing criminals. But towards the tail end of that story, he got captured and then basically spawn symbiotes, you know, the little sort of seeds for new symbiotes were extracted from him to make new ones. And there were, I think there were 5 or 6 of them. Only one of them was still around again at the end of that story, and even then I think only appeared one more time. This wasn't stuff that too many people cared about. It made for some neat visuals, but that's kind of about it. But to a certain degree, it's not a totally invalid story to pull from if you're doing a solo Venom movie that doesn't involve Spider-Man, which is that even though Spider-Man actually appears heavily in the story itself, he doesn't really impact the narrative of it as much. It is really Venom's story. They just shove Spider-Man in a lot because I would guess by editorial mandate they were probably nervous that Venom couldn't quite carry his own book yet. Now again, Planet of the Symbiotes I haven't read, but I'm pretty sure it's basically an invasion kind of story if I am remembering what I heard about it. But honestly, the specifics don't matter because it's not going to be a faithful adaptation of either of these, because really almost none of the comic book movies that have been made are specifically and faithfully adapting specific comic book storylines. I mean, unless it's something like Watchmen, which only has the one story, had the one story anyways, until recently. But my point being, when heroes who have had long-running stories about them, generally they might pull specific stories to pull influence from, but they generally haven't been faithfully adapting them. I mean, when X-Men did Days of Future Past, it took the gimmick, but didn't even have the same character going back in time, changed a whole lot of things. Captain America Civil War was vastly different, but kept the heart of the idea of we're going to have the heroes butt heads, and there's going to be a regulation thing kind of at the heart of it, so on. So I could keep listing examples. But again, they generally don't adapt specific storylines like really faithfully. So, and obviously these two stories don't naturally feed into each other, so I have to zero in on the common thread, which, as I said, is symbiotes other than Venom. And there's a reason that I don't like that, because in my mind, if you're going to make Venom as a solo character, if it is going to work at all, if it's going to have any prayer, then with the angle they're going for, because they've said they want something horror tinged and R-rated, which okay, that can work. In my mind, Venom has to be the only symbiote in his first movie, because he has not been. Yes, I know Spider-Man 3. Everyone wants to forget about Spider-Man 3. Modern, the era of comic book movies, basically, you know, since Iron Man, we have not seen Venom. So you have to establish him, and you have to establish what is special and important about him. And a really quick way to dilute that is to flood the screen with a bunch of other people who can do the same thing he can do. That immediately devalues him. It immediately makes him less special. And it's not something that would be such a problem if he was getting introduced in a Spider-Man movie first and then getting spun off, because you know, audiences would have a chance to wrap their head around this character on his own, and then you spin him off and he's facing others kind of like him. Like, oh, okay, kind of interesting. But they've got to start from the ground level here. So if you're not getting into, you know, his connection with Spider-Man, then you have to really dig in to the link that he has with the symbiote. And I feel that's where a lot of the horror should come from. It should be almost body horror. What is this thing doing to him? How much control does he have over that? You know, have him go up against somebody superpowered, but not another symbiote. I mean, you can pretty much take your pick of almost any villain. I mean, if they're going the Lethal Protector route and he's like protecting people from, you know, a really particularly violent criminal, hell, you could have him take on the Scorpion. You know what would work? You could have him take on Alistair Smythe and the Spider Slayers. Instead of him being obsessed with Spider-Man, he's obsessed with stopping Venom. And, you know, he builds these machines to take down Venom and eventually augments himself to try and take down Venom. Or, you know, heck, you could make up a villain for Venom to take on, because again, the first movie should be about him pretty laser focused, and Venom does not have that many enemies unique to him. Like he has had run-in with various characters in the Marvel universe, but he doesn't really have his own rogues gallery, so it doesn't really matter who the villain is initially. Now, a lot of people might say, well, didn't we always know there was going to be other symbiotes? Didn't they say Carnage was going to be in this? They did, but the wording that we'd gotten up to this point gave me a slight sliver of hope, which is that when it was announced that Carnage was going to be appearing, what was actually confirmed was the character of Cletus Cassidy, who comic book fans know will become Carnage, was going to be appearing. So my hope was that Cletus Cassidy, the serial killer, would get seeded and introduced, hopefully not as the main villain, but would appear and be established in this film. Maybe at the very end, maybe as a post-credits, you show his becoming Carnage, and then second film is Carnage versus Venom, because once basically you take a movie to establish who Venom is, what makes him dangerous, what makes him interesting, and why we should be rooting for him, but also like get a little bit of, you know, here's this Cletus Cassidy guy as well, you know, establish why he's dangerous and why he's kind of nuts, give him similar powers, and then in the sequel, that's just an immediate ramp up of everything, because we had this hero, this violent hero, who could have spent the first movie largely just grappling with himself and trying to come to terms with himself. Okay, he's got it, but now he has to face something that is very much like him, but way worse than him. That's a natural escalation for a sequel. But if you throw symbiotes right off the bat, whether it's Carnage or any of the others, you just immediately, again, you make Venom himself less unique. You make him less special. You make him less interesting. And that's not me saying that symbiotes can never be introduced down the line. I just think that's a really bad idea to do as a starting point. It feels like they're flooding too much stuff in right at the bat, which Sony does a lot of. I mean, that was the epitome of what went wrong with the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, the second one especially. Sony as a company does not understand that sometimes less is more, and that you just need to get the character right, and the more flash and extra stuff you put in there, the less you are focusing on the character that you have to sell, because he's not getting established in a Spider-Man movie first. So you have to get him right. And putting all this other stuff in, I'm not saying it's impossible to get it right, but I don't have the faith in Sony to be able to juggle all this stuff and actually deliver a well-meaning character. I think that this movie should be stripped down. He should be the only symbiote. It should be a relatively contained budget. We shouldn't have a ton of CGI all over the place. Limit it to just Venom. But the more I hear about this, and this especially, I'm just thinking, you guys, you're just going to flood the screen with a bunch of CGI, and there's going to be 50 million symbiotes running around, and there's going to be a friggin' laser into the sky that opens a portal to the symbiote planet and is going to signal the invasion of more symbiotes. I would not be shocked at this point. I don't know, man. I never had a lot of hope for the Venom movie. I thought it was a stupid idea in the first place. But when I heard that, I mean, I like Tom Hardy as an actor. He's an okay pick. And when I heard they were going for a horror angle, I actually start to think of ways that it could work. I'm now losing hope with that because, you know what? Here's a good comparison. If they want to do Venom as a horror movie, Venom needs to be alien. And then in the sequel, you up the stakes because a lot of horror is derived from stuff we don't understand and the unknown. So you have a lot of questions about the symbiote, how it works, can he get a hold of it? So that one is your alien. Really tightly focused, not overly grand or huge, but really zeroed in on the characters and the fact that we don't know a ton about this thing yet. And then your second one, then you bring in a whole bunch more symbiotes, and that's your aliens, which is not as scary, but brings up the spectacle level. You jump right to aliens immediately, then you don't have Alien and Aliens anymore. You have Starship Troopers, which is a fine movie, but is not the same thing. It's really hard for anything going for a horror vibe to go big right off the bat. Horror, in my opinion, in my experience, horror works best small and self-contained. If you want to expand it out later, go ahead, because that's a way to keep you from just repeating the same thing over and over, you know, like the slashers do ad nauseum. But you go big immediately and it's not scary. It's too grand. It needs to be small. It needs to be personal. We need to care. And the more symbiotes you throw at the screen, I, for one, the less I'm going to care. So that'll do it for this one. Those are my thoughts on the news about the stories they're pulling from for the Venom movie. Did you hear this news, or are you hearing it from me? God, am I a news source for people? Ugh, that's a frightening thought. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Not all of that stuff, like, subscribe. I've got a podcast. I've got 2 podcasts. They're on 2 different feeds. There's links down below. I'll try and shrink the outro a little bit. So you know what? Until next time, this council is adjourned.